I do have a bit of an introduction here as to how I came, sitting here in Falmouth, Massachusetts, came to find Mary Martin, who's joined us, has delightfully joined us this morning. I'm so pleased that she's been able to. We've had two other talks this week based on postcards, but also Falmouth history. And this today, we're really looking at collecting postcards and what that means. But let me just give you a little bit of background as where this has all started, as we have lots of new people here this morning. Postcards from Falmouth is a special local history project of the Falmouth Public Library that is based upon our historical postcard collection of noted buildings, landmarks, and locations within the town of Falmouth. The library is working on creating an oral history based upon the two postcard collections generously given to the library by Anita Gunning and Robert C. Hunt Jr. Postcards from Falmouth is made possible through a Library Services and Technology Act grant, which is administered through the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. This series of talks is also made possible thanks to the help of the Falmouth Public Library trustees and FCTV. And I can't thank Andrew enough for all his help this week. And we hope by the end of this series that those of you listening will be inspired to look at our postcard collections and share your memories of Falmouth. Now, I know a lot of you don't have necessarily memories of Falmouth, but we're making one for you right now. And I want you to know how I actually got to Mary, because we were, as you know, shut down. As many of you know, we were shut down mid-March. So our building has been closed, although the library, we say, has been open because we've been answering phone calls and doing programs and answering emails and keeping track of Twitter and Facebook, etc. But what I discovered in May, back in May, was this issue of Antique Trader. And on the cover, you will see this cover story was Postcard Passion, enjoying a picturesque view. And I'm sorry my phone is ringing. One moment. I'm on Zoom, bye. And so that's that. We've done this this is the third one, first phone call. In any case, I discovered this Antique Trader Postcard Passion article, and within it, it talked about the fact that one of the articles in here first appeared in Metro News, a bulletin of the Metropolitan Postcard Club of New York City, which I had never heard of before. And being a reference librarian, I'm like, well, I need to check on this Metropolitan Postcard Club of New York City. So I found their webpage, which was simple enough to do, and learned a little bit more about the Metropolitan Postcard Club of New York City, which was formerly called the Metropolitan Postcard Collectors Club, and is the oldest continuously run postcard club in the United States. Membership is made up of both collectors and dealers of postcards from coast to coast, and many from foreign countries as well. And they've been facilitating the exchange of postcards since its founding in 1946. So I then saw that they had a president. So I contacted their president, Rod Kennedy, who was very gracious and very helpful and put me in connection with our speaker today, Mary L. Martin. And Mary L. Martin has operated Mary L. Martin Limited for many years, continuing the worldwide postcard business founded by her parents in the 1960s. She's the author of several books and is considered a leading expert on postcards, their history, rarity, and value. She conducts several postcard conventions each year in New York City and other locations. From Perryville, Maryland, she sells postcards and supplies by mail. And in Havre de Grace, Maryland, she and her staff have a retail outlet. Her inventory of collectible cards in all categories is among the world's largest. And her most recent book, which she's going to share some information with us about today, is a guidebook of collectible postcards. So thank you so much, Mary, for joining us, and I will give the Zoom talk over to you.
Thank you, Jill. This is really fun. This is my first Zoom talk, although I love to talk about my postcard passion. It's the first time I've had a chance to do it by Zoom. So I'll start with just a teeny bit of history about how my parents got started in the postcard business. My dad was a stamp and coin collector, and when he met my mother, they would travel together to shows, and my mother wasn't interested in stamp and coin, so she bought postcards that were usually not too important on the edge of a table at a stamp show. And they cost maybe 5 cents to 10 cents, and she would just really pick out what she thought was pretty. She traveled around and did this with my dad for a few years. And so after a while, she got quite a large collection, and she decided to do a mail auction. And mail auction was kind of normal in the 60s. Stamp and coin dealers were doing it, but my mom decided to do it. I spent my childhood watching her type up auctions, looking at every single postcard and writing a description, putting it in the mail. I think her first auction, she made $35, and she was ecstatic. So this was in the 60s. After I was born, she really started to travel a lot more and do shows. Really, the only club or show that was really well established was the Metropolitan Postcard Club, and they had a show. And actually, Leah, who's joined the call today, ran the show. And I was young. I remember my first show was at the Union Hall in Manhattan, and going in and fascinated. I saw Leah running the show, and I was just so impressed and so fascinated. Here I was in New York City, and all of these collectors, and now to think I get to help the club run their show. It's fun, it's exciting, and it's been a really wonderful way to spend my life. My parents, my whole life has been postcards. My father quit his job as lawyer in the 70s to help my mom run the business. It started in our garage in the 70s. It moved in the 80s to our basement. In the 90s, my dad purchased a car dealership. It used to be a Ford car dealership. It was probably 10,000 square feet, which we opened and filled with postcards, millions of postcards. Now, I will say my dad was the accumulator, the buyer, and my mom was more the detailist, very organized. My mom was German. Everything was completely organized and cataloged perfectly. I take after my dad a little bit more, not as organized, but I pretty much know where everything is in our warehouse. So if you ask me for a specific town or subject, we have it arranged like that. So our postcards, if you would come into our warehouse, are very long aisles, maybe 15 feet high. And we have them by states, country. Within the states, we have them by towns. And then we have subjects, from anything from automobiles, astronomy, to zoos, everything in between. Because everything that ever was talked about was put on a postcard, every subject matter. So I guess in the early 2000s, when my mom died, I started running the business full time, although my dad was still traveling and doing shows. And my son, after college, joined me in running the business. And I probably did maybe 35 to 40 coffee top books on different towns throughout the United States. So I would co-author them with people that actually lived in the towns. I did on Cape Cod, I did one in Houston, Texas, all over the United States, but I would partner with maybe a local historian to do the book. So I would provide a lot of images, and they would provide a lot of text for the books. So I did a lot of those, and then I guess a good friend of my parents in 2012 wanted to redo a book that him and my mom had done on Falmouth Muka postcards. And my mother started collecting Muka postcards in the 70s. She would go to Paris and buy these cards. Now, again, I didn't even know anybody that had been to Europe, let alone my mom was going there to buy postcards. And this was a huge deal in our family. And she brought back postcards that we had never seen before by beautiful French artists and French topics and subjects. And so her love was Alphonse Mucha. So she bought all the Mucha cards that she could find. And probably in, I guess, 1979, David Bowers nudged her to do a book on it because the cards were lovely, but they weren't, it was hard to put them in categories, and auction houses had trouble with how to describe them. So my mom and Dave assigned numbers to every Muka card that they found. And to this day, those numbers are still used in auction houses when they're selling the cards. And I was able to redo the book with Dave a few years ago, and we did it in color, and we did it for about, 1% of the price that it cost them to do it in black and white. But my mom put a lot of effort into it. At the time Dave lived, he is a celebrity among coin dealers, and he lived in Beverly Hills. And I remember these packages from FedEx coming every day from the documents, because there was no computer then. So Dave would write the documents, FedEx would deliver the packages from Beverly Hills. My mom would, write back. And I remember her doing the book and how entailed everything was, all the details. So I think about that often when I talk to Dave, because doing the book this time was quite different. Without Dave, I probably, if I wasn't nudged by him to do it, I probably would have had a hard time taking on the project, because I'm not as organized as him. He's a great writer. So he was, postcards, putting postcards in an encyclopedia of collecting is difficult. It's much easier for numismatics, coin dealers, or stamp dealers to document things because we have lists of things that were produced, published. Postcards we don't, because you didn't have to be a publishing company to put out a postcard. You could just take your own photograph and put it on a postcard. So every month of my life still, I see postcards on subjects that I never knew existed. So when Dave said he wanted to do a book with Whitman to talk about the whole hobby, I didn't know where to begin, but he put it into subject matters that made it work. He started with the timeline and talking about the very earliest postcards that were commercially produced during the Columbian Exposition. And then we dated them all the way to current postcards. And so within that, he talks about the values and how to build a collection. He talks about purchase, like where to go, like clubs and online and different ways to build and obtain your collection. Then within the book, he also has checklists for different artists and publishers. Obviously, we couldn't even attempt to touch on the smallest amount, but he gave an idea. We thought it'd be a good idea to show people how to put a checklist together, because people do checklists now every day. In fact, I put my own checklist together on subjects. So that was an important way to do it. And then he broke we thought we would break it into subjects. So social history, real photography, holidays, artists, advertising. And within those chapters, we showed illustrations, and we gave an idea on how to price the cards. Now, obviously, books change, prices change, but we thought it would still be a good guide. So even in 10 years, you'll say, okay, well, this card was $25 in 2020. And, you can relate it to what the cards will be in the future. But he talked about, we both talked about condition, pricing, and we put in maybe 24 chapters with over 400 pages and 1,500 illustrations into the book to give people an idea. And Dave, being a prolific writer, and he's done so many books. Like I said, he's a celebrity in the coin world. So it was a true honor to have him co-author the book. And then Leonard Lauder, the owner of Estee Lauder, who is a club member his whole life of the Metro Club. He did the foreword for the book, which again was a true honor. He was friends with my parents and a friend of Dave. So it's a true honor to have him write in the book and talk about a little bit about his collecting. and about his collection in the Boston Museum of Arts. And so we thought that we did the best we could with the resources of Whitman Publishing to bring a full guide to In Color and cover every aspect of the hobby. And we talk a little bit about what makes the postcards collectible, but really that is in the eyes of the beholder with your collection. So people always ask me, what is the most expensive card you ever sold? Well, actually, the most expensive card I ever sold was in a charity to Rosie O'Donnell for $50,000 that she donated the money to someone that had cancer. But in private, real life, the most expensive card I ever sold was a Mooka card of the Waverly Cycle postcard. And it was $14,000 and a little over $14,000. And I have a picture of it. I hope people can see it okay. Not too much of a glare. It's this one right here. It's an advertising postcard, and it's very rare. There's only maybe a dozen known, and that Dave and my mom had seen before. That's the most expensive postcard I've ever sold, but the majority of postcards sell between $2 to $30. So you can obtain a nice collection really for some cards for the price of a Hallmark card nowadays. And certainly there's rare cards that sell into the hundreds or thousands of dollars. But I would say a majority of people that come to shows or come into my store to purchase cards really are in that ballpark of $10 or $15. And no matter what your subject matter is, you don't have to be a postcard collector to collect postcards, because like stamps and coins, it's hard for somebody to show you a stamp and you fall in love with it if you're not a stamp collector. But I can show people postcards and they say, oh, I don't collect postcards, but I'll show them postcards of perhaps their Dalmatian that they have, or maybe they're a golf player and I show them famous golf courses, and then instantly they'll decide to start building a small collection. Or they'll start collecting their town where their mother went to church, and then after they found everything, they'll buy everything in the county. But I would say postcards are a pretty affordable hobby. And, you know, to hold something in your hand over 100 years old that traveled across the country for 1 penny is pretty amazing. And it's so affordable. And you have to remember, and, you know, many of you, I'm sure you know this from your talks earlier this week, when people lived on a ranch in Montana in 1915, they couldn't really turn on the television to get current events of something that was happening in New York City. So when that penny postcard came to their door, it was a big deal. I mean, it was a big deal. They put it on their coffee table in a beautiful album of postcards, and they would show it off. And this was a way they could really see a current picture of what was going on in small town America, or even Europe during the war. I mean, so to own a piece of history in your hands, pretty affordable. I think it's the best hobby in the world. And not everything is rare that is the most beautiful. I mean, you know, I showed you a postcard of one that I sold for $14,000, but this is a Mooka card that isn't even that attractive, but it was advertising, and it's so unique that that card itself is worth a few $1,000s because nobody's really seen it. It was just a small advertising card that Mooka did. It really wasn't mass produced. So just because something is beautiful, or it doesn't necessarily mean it's the rarest. I learn a lot about postcards, mostly from, besides my parents, are my clients, because my clients are authorities in their subject. So whether they're collecting a subject like Titanic, or if they're collecting Cape Cod Railway. I mean, I certainly know what a rare railroad card is, or a rare Titanic, but I learned the details, and I learned the history of almost every subject from my clients. So they're really my teachers. And I tried to put that into the book, all the details that I've learned through different things, and my clients being the teachers of their subjects, because they are authorities in their subjects, whether it's boxing or Santa collecting or advertising. So the book reflects a lot of different type of novelty cards, and we try to show different things, like this would be a real hair postcard, so it's actually a novelty with real hair attached to it. And we show rare photography postcards in the book with aviation, railroads. We try to show many subject matter, social history. So we touch upon social history, so Titanic, parades, suffragette movements, holidays, big category. We talk about all the different artists in the book. We talk about different publishers, and we show beautiful images of rare cards, and we do touch on things that aren't as rare, that are beautiful and happen. My favorite topic is the patriotic holidays. I like it because you don't see patriotic holidays any longer. So patriotic things, social history, that is probably what I collect the most, I would say. But I also collect anything that I, like my mom, that I think is unique and beautiful. We talk about different types of cards. Some cards were sent in installment sets. So they were, the group will make up an image. And then we talk about advertising, early advertising on postcards, which is very collectible and beautiful and colorful. And the book is probably one of the best overall looks of the hobby that we could put into 400 pages. So it's 400 pages, 100 illustrations, 22 chapters of everything that my life that I could figure about talking about, and everything of Dave's. My puppy is running around, so I'm sorry if you see a distraction in the back. But I think, I guess the best way for me to probably talk about the book is maybe people asking me questions, because I think that, I can really tell people exactly what they want to know. So I don't know, Jill, if you want to open it up to questions with people, or, if you would like to see more of the book, or this is what the book looks like. It is a soft cover. We went back and forth on whether or not to do soft or hard, but we wanted to keep it affordable at $39 and, not make it an $80 book. But we also wanted to make it so people could put it into a bag and take it to shows and use it as a reference guide. So if people have any questions for me, I'd love to chat more.
Well, I have a question to start off. And if you have a question, anybody that's listening right now, please just put it into the chat and we'll respond. We will get that question. It looks like we can I'll make sure that Mary hears your question. She probably can see the questions as well. Okay. Actually, I'm going to start with the first question that's asked, which is, where can we purchase the book?
Well, you can purchase it through marielmartin.com. And if you get it from me, and if you want it signed to anyone in particular, I'm flattered. Amazon doesn't have it now, but Amazon is advertising as a hardcover, but it's not a hardcover. It doesn't come that way. Also, Whitman Publishing is selling it. But if you go to marielmartin.com, it should be on our website, or email us, and I'm more than happy to get it right out to you.
Okay, we have some more questions here. And somebody mentions that they had ordered the book from Amazon and they do not have any scheduled delivery date, but you just explained the Amazon question. And are there any postcards about Jeep Wranglers?
Jeep Wranglers. Well, there are postcards of Jeep Wranglers. I'm glad you said that. So advertising, early advertising, you can see like this Harley Davidson is very collectible, but also, which I didn't talk about, the book goes to current postcards, which a lot of people could be familiar with, cards that are called rack cards or go cards. So these were printed in the 90s and into the 2000s. They were given away for free, and they were put in restaurant walls, and you could just take them, and they were done by some of the most creative advertising minds of our period. And they would advertise things like automobiles, alcohol, chewing gum, movies coming out. But so there are Jeep Wranglers is the answer to the question.
I happen to know, I think I saw behind you a book that said Cape Cod. Have you done a Cape Cod postcard book?
Yes, I have. I did. So I purposely put that up knowing I was with you guys today. So, and it was Karen Chapa and I did this book, and it's really all different pictures of Cape Cod. It's more of it's a picture book. There is not, there are prices in it to give like a rough idea of pricing. But I did 40 books from all over the US of different towns.
Okay, here we have another question for you, which a good question, Tim. I'm equally interested in the answer to this question. What is your understanding of any copyright restrictions on publishing some categories of postcards in a book?
That is a really great question. I get asked that a lot. Unless it's, from what my understanding, it's prior to the 50s, there are no rights. You can use it for what you like to use it, unless it's copyrighted by a company like Disney or Coca-Cola. A majority of postcards do not have copyright issues. So I get asked that very often.
All right, and I have another question for you, I think I thought of this based on what you were just telling us about postcards and how much postcards can be worth or not worth. And I am wondering, do you ever run into a postcard forgery? Like is that even a thing with postcards, that people try to forge postcards?
They do. Forgery is, I have this discussion with my friend Dave Bowers. I mean, even the earliest coins the Romans used were forged. So there's always been some type of forgery. In a way, the hobby, I think, is a little blessed with that. The cards, a majority of the cards are not worth doing forgeries of, because you can afford the majority of them. But certainly when they're very affordable. So you're not going to forge a card that's worth $20. But certainly when you get into the $1,000, $1,500 range, you can get forgeries. And it can be tough because people are good at it now. I mean, paper quality can be replicated and people are good at it. I'm fortunate. I haven't had a lot of problems with it, but I've known of a few cases. So yes, I think if you ever want to get into collecting a subject matter that's rare, expensive, you should buy from a reputable dealer that will back the card and that will retake it back if you found a problem with it. I mean, I certainly would not suggest or advocate people buying $1,000 Art Nouveau card on eBay from somebody that they don't know, because of that exact issue. You want to buy it from a person that's reputable. And there's many of them. And there's an IFPD roster, a list of dealers from across the country that are recognized as leading experts.
All right, we have another question from the audience. You mentioned the Columbian Exposition. What is the significance of that?
Well, the Columbian Exposition is kind of our basis when we say the first postcard was commercially released to the public. So they presented it as a way to send mail across the country as a very affordable way. I mean, there are certainly, I mean, my friends and colleagues and I know that there were postcards produced earlier than that. There were government postal cards that didn't have the illustrations on the front that postcards do, but there were postcards mailed prior to the Columbian Exposition, but we are saying, and as the book will explain, that's like when it was first commercially printed, postcards at the Columbian Expo.
Okay, and somebody has already gone to your website and looked to buy the book and says they can't find a place to buy the book on your website.
I know, we're working on that right away.
Okay.
And you have to email or click, I'm sorry, but they are adding, there's a lot of graphics they're putting up of the book so people can actually look through the book. So it should be any day, but please email me and it'll be on there. And I see Leah has asked me why we spelled postcard as one word. And it's a good question. People sell it both ways. The publisher, Whitman Publisher, went back and forth with it, and they just concluded that postcard is one word. But I agree with you, Leah. I mean, certainly we've seen it as two words. On the back of a postcard, it's spelled as two words, but that's how the publisher wanted to do it. And I did allow them to make some editing things like that in the book. But I agree with you, Leah.
Here's another question. On the marymartin.com website, might you be able sometime to allow searching on keywords?
You know, my website probably is antiquated compared to a lot of websites. I think it's an important thing. we do a lot of shows, and with the lack of shows going on this year, it has given us a chance to A, complete the book, B, try to work on more things like our website, and C, work on our shop, which is going to be more of a gallery. The president of the Metro Club years ago suggested to me, Mary, you need to make, Rod said, you need to make your shop more of like a museum. Because now when you used to walk into my store, things would be in boxes and you couldn't see the beautiful cards. So if you weren't a collector, you didn't even know it was in the box. But now, since the lack of shows due to COVID, we've had time to really renovate and make the shop beautiful. So when you walk in, it'll look more like art instead of just cards in boxes. But also, on that note, when you come into the shop to appeal to the younger generation, we have a touchscreen computer where you can go up and you type in La Jolla, California, or baseball, and it'll show you images of those cards. Now, everything we have won't be on there, but it'll give younger people an idea what's available and what to ask for. And so that way we're introducing cards to younger people. I mean, we've got the collectors covered. When they come in, they know what they're looking for. But we're trying to reach out and explain to younger people that, this early part of history, the early email is so fun, and the messages can be just as extraordinary as the card. But I do like all criticism and ideas and suggestions on my website because it's needed.
Okay, what things do you look at to date a postcard?
Yeah, that's another great question. People always ask, well, how old do you know this is old? And I can date postcards like my mom could cook without measuring things. I just can, pick it up and by the paper. I mean, a lot of things, and we'll explain that in the book, will be whether the back's divided or undivided, or, certainly if it's postmarked or dated, cancel, that's easy, but it's not always like that. But you can tell by the paper sometimes, and, on the linen texture of a card, whether it was done in the 40s. But the book explains that, there's definitely easy ways for the beginning collector to figure that out.
And are there any more, if you have any more questions, now the time to type them out. But I want to say one of the postcards that you showed this morning was that series of fish postcards, which were incredible. Or is that common that they take a whole bunch of postcards? What's the history of that?
Really fun. That's why I picked it out. And they're called installment cards. And this particular set is 4, but some installment sets can be up to maybe 30 cards. And, you know, they'll maybe make a picture of Napoleon or, I mean, so they're really fun. People would send, this is an unused set, but people would send one at a time. And they did all different images, Santa Claus, mosquitoes, kittens, and all different things. But they're a novelty, so they're hard to find sometimes all together. But they're called installments. The set probably sells for maybe $60, but sometimes they're hard to find in great condition, but because kids will play with them. But when the rack cards were done, these cards that I was telling you about that are newer, Absolute Vodka did a series, and they did a series of a dozen that made a vodka bottle to make that people would come back and pick them up. And those are quite clever too. So, you know, it was a good idea 100 years ago, and it was a good idea 15 years ago, because people like to put things together and to collect things.
All right, any last questions? I think we are good then. I'm really delighted that you've been able to join us today. And I hear lawnmowers behind me, so which means apparently the DPW didn't get the message that we were doing this today. But what a great fountain of knowledge you are. Absolutely fabulous. And we look forward, we have already put in our order for the book, so we hope to have a copy at the Falmouth Public Library before long. And we so appreciate all of you that have come to these talks this week, that have, and those of you that came today it's just great. Please do look at our postcard collections, which are now online. You can see them right from our falmouthpubliclibrary.org webpage. They're front and center. So do take a look at those. And if you have a story to share with us about a Falmouth postcard, please let me know. And we would love to share that story with more people. So thank you again, Mary. I really appreciate your being here.
Very much. I appreciate it. Thanks.